had been driving for 2 hours heading to the Marriott in Baltimore. My wife was attending a conference there, and I planned to surprise her by showing up and taking her out for dinner. Over the past 3 months, I've had this gut feeling that Megan, my wife, might be seeing one of her colleagues. It seemed like every time she had to go on a business trip, training session, or conference, something else was happening behind the scenes. Tonight, I was determined to catch her in the act and finally end it all. Megan and I have been together for 14 years, married right after high school. We have 2 lovely kids, Sarah, who's 12, and Todd, who's 10, both currently staying with my mother. Megan and I had dated during the last 2 years of high school, and transitioning into marriage felt like a natural next step. She was smart, always in a good mood, and kept her brown hair long. She was slim with sharp features, not an ounce of extra weight on her. Until about 3 months ago, I thought our marriage was strong. It was just small things I couldn't quite identify, but enough to make me suspicious. I avoided bringing it up because I didn't want to come across as paranoid or overly jealous, but today's conference was close enough that I could drop by unexpectedly, and maybe I'd finally catch her in the middle of it all. I grabbed my suit bag and went to the front desk. "Hi, I'm Phil Jenkins. My wife Megan is here for the insurance conference, staying in room 214. She said I could pick up a key from you." The receptionist checked the computer, retrieved a key, and asked, "Could I see some ID?" "Please, sure." "No problem," I replied, handing over my driver's license. As I walked to the elevator, I was a bundle of nerves. What would I do if I found her? What would I even say? Should I knock or just walk in? Would the door be latched? Would she be alone or even in the room? As I approached the door, I decided to just insert the key and see what happened. Trying to be as quiet as possible, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. Megan was sitting at a desk with her briefcase open, working on some paperwork. She turned around, startled, and gasped, "Damn it, Phil, you scared me." "What are you doing here?" "Hi, honey. I had some free time and thought I'd drop by to take you out for dinner," I responded. "Great, you're staying the night, right? I could really use some company," she said, giving me a big kiss. Well, there went my grand plan to catch her in the act. "Do we have time for a quickie before dinner?" I asked hopefully. "I need to shower first, but how about after we eat?" "We'll have all night," she replied with a grin. I felt relieved to be wrong about her cheating. I loved this woman and didn't want to lose her. With a smile on her face, she headed to the bathroom to shower. I sat down on the bed and noticed Megan's toiletry case on the dresser. Feeling the tension of the day, I looked for some aspirin to ease my headache from the long drive. But instead of aspirin, I found something else, a pack of 6 condoms tucked into a side pocket of her case. Holding them in my hand, I sat down on the bed, puzzled. After Todd was born, Megan had switched to birth control pills, but they made her nauseous, so we agreed I would get a vasectomy. Since then, we hadn't used any form of birth control, no pills, no condoms. So what were these doing in her toiletry case? I wasn't an idiot. It didn't take long for me to figure out that Megan was, in fact, cheating. Now I was at a loss for what to do next. Sifting through her case, I found a couple of safety pins she used for clothing emergencies. I took one of the pins and carefully poked a hole in the center of each condom before placing them back exactly as I'd found them. Megan was still in the shower, so I stepped away and called my friend Freddie. "Hey Freddie, it's Phil. I need you to do me a favor." "Sure. What's up?" he asked. "In about an hour, call me and tell me there's a pipe burst at the school, and I need to get there ASAP. Just call and I'll handle the rest," I instructed. "Got it. I'll call around 7. Take care, buddy." I didn't want to spend the night with Megan. I regretted what we'd already done and didn't want to add to it. I needed the drive home to think things through. As Megan came out of the shower, it took every ounce of restraint not to confront her then and there. I was seething inside, hurt by this woman I had once trusted. I wasn't a violent person, and I rarely lost my temper, but this time, staying calm was a struggle. I quickly realized it was best not to let on that I knew about her affair. By the time we reached the dining room, I was completely downcast. "Order whatever you'd like, darling. I can expense it," I told her. "I'm not very hungry." "I think I'll just have the small fettuccine," she replied. "That sounds good to me too. How about a bottle of rose with that?" I suggested. After the waiter took our order, I couldn't resist probing a bit. "Megan, are you happy with how our marriage is going?" "Of course," she said. "I've got a nice home, 2 wonderful kids, and a husband who loves me. What more could I ask for?" "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing everything I can to keep you happy. I feel so fortunate to have such an amazing wife that sometimes I have to pinch myself to make sure it's real," I admitted. "Oh, you silly goose. Is that why you drove all the way down here to see me?" she laughed. "Well, I don't think you need to worry. I'm happy, content, and you're doing everything right. A woman couldn't ask for a better husband than you." The waiter brought our meals, and we spent the rest of dinner making small talk. Just as the plates were being cleared away, my phone rang. I excused myself and stepped into the lobby to avoid disturbing other diners. I waited a few moments before returning to the table. "That was Freddie. I told Megan a water pipe burst at the school, and I have to head back right away. I'm really sorry, but I have to cancel our evening together." Megan looked disappointed, though I couldn't tell if it was genuine or not. It didn't seem to matter whether I stayed or left. Either way, she would get what she wanted. As we were about to enter the elevator, we crossed paths with Kirk Langford. He was the business associate Megan often traveled with. "Oh, hi, Megan," he said. "I stopped by your room to see if you wanted to grab dinner, but there was no answer." Now I see why he extended his hand to me. "Kirk Langford, and you must be Phil. Megan talks about you all the time." Phil came down for the night, but an emergency came up and he has to leave, Megan explained. "Guess I'll be sleeping alone again tonight," she added with a laugh. It was hard to shake hands and fake a smile. As we rode up in the elevator, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Megan, I'd really like you to quit your job, and I'd feel much better if you weren't working with Kirk," I said, trying to keep calm. "We've been over this. Phil, I have no plans to quit. I enjoy my job and am learning so much from Kirk. You've got to stop being paranoid about him and me," she replied firmly. When we got to the room, I gave her a quick kiss, grabbed my bags, and left for the drive home. The whole way back, I couldn't stop thinking about Kirk dropping by Megan's room after his dinner. By the time I arrived at the house, I was a wreck. I was starting to hate my wife for what she was doing to me. I wished I could be like those men who find clever ways to catch their cheating wives, but I was at a loss. I didn't even know how to avoid being intimate with her. What I really wanted was a divorce, but I didn't have enough proof to justify it. I felt defeated, knowing my wife was unfaithful, and yet unable to do anything about it. 2 days later, Megan came home looking as happy as a schoolgirl. It was obvious she'd had a great time, which only fueled my anger. I checked her bag and noticed one condom still remained, with the hole I'd poked in it. That night, being with her felt more like a duty than a pleasure. On Saturday, we attended the Globus Insurance Company picnic. At least the kids would have some fun. But it wasn't a day I was looking forward to. I couldn't shake the feeling that some of the other employees knew what was happening. I tried to stay out of sight, fearing I'd become the subject of some crude joke. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I couldn't help it. Megan was having a great time chatting with everyone, especially Kirk. They weren't being overly physical, but they were definitely close. I was practically invisible, which suited me just fine. "Hi, I'm Janet Langford. You must be Phil Jenkins," said a stunning woman. Now I was really confused. I thought my wife was gorgeous, but Janet Langford looked like she had stepped out of a pin-up magazine, with long auburn hair and striking blue eyes. She had a perfect figure, though she was a bit on the shorter side. Why on earth would Kirk cheat on someone like her? "Oh, sorry, I got lost in thought for a moment. It's nice to meet you," I replied. "Do you think we could go somewhere and talk? Somewhere away from the kids and the crowd?" she asked. "Sure, let's head down by the lake. No one will notice we're gone," I agreed. We found a quiet bench about 100 yards from the picnic area, overlooking the water. "I'm all ears. What did you want to talk about?" I asked. Janet hesitated. "This is hard for me. I'm not sure how to bring it up. It's a sensitive issue." At that moment, I knew she was aware. I decided to make it easier for her. "Are you referring to the affair between Kirk and my wife?" I asked. "I just found out this week," and Janet seemed relieved. "I've known for about 2 months. I'm preparing to have the divorce papers served, but I need a little assistance. I hired a private investigator to gather evidence, but my lawyer said my case would be stronger if Megan could testify or at least sign a notarized statement confirming the affair." "What kind of proof do you have?" I asked. "I've got photos and recorded phone conversations. I haven't managed to get any video yet, but the photos are pretty solid, along with specific dates and times," she explained. "I'll do my best to help. I'm not sure exactly how, but I'll work on it. Do you think your lawyer could assist me with the divorce papers using some of the evidence you've gathered? I'd appreciate it because I don't have any proof at all." "I'm also suing Globus," Janet added. "I have signed statements that prove certain higher-ups at the company knew about the affair and did nothing to stop it. They'll either fire both of them or face $1 million lawsuit." "Wow, I'm really impressed," I responded. "Kirk is playing golf tomorrow morning. Can you stop by the house around mid-morning? He'll be gone until late afternoon. I can show you what I've collected, and we can figure out what to do next. I live at 206 Hemlock Avenue in Cressman." "Sounds like a plan. Well, not a date, but you know what I mean," I said, and we both shared a laugh. I felt at ease with her. As we walked back to the picnic area, it was clear no one had noticed we'd been gone. I started feeling a lot more hopeful, thinking maybe this mess could finally get resolved. The next morning went as expected. Megan told me she had some errands to run and would be out for a few hours. After she left, I dropped the kids off at my mum's house and headed over to Cressman. Janet greeted me at the door and led me into the den. There was a sleek leather couch and a large computer monitor on the table in front of it, displaying an empty motel room. She gestured for me to sit. "I've got beer, soda, and wine. What would you like?" she asked. "Just a regular soda, Pepsi if you have it." She sat beside me. "So here's what's going on. In a few minutes, we'll be watching my lovely husband play a round of golf, living and in full color. And don't be shocked, you're probably going to recognize his caddy." "How did you pull this off?" I asked, genuinely curious. It cost me $1,400 to set everything up, but it'll be worth it. Of course, Kirk will end up paying for it, she smirked. It should last about 2 hours, so make yourself comfortable. I've got popcorn and nachos if you're hungry. And I'll get a DVD of the whole session, so I'll make sure you get a copy too. I don't really want to see this, I admitted, but at the same time I can't miss it. Let the show begin, she said. We made small talk for about 20 minutes as she showed me the evidence she had compiled. I was astounded by the photos, recordings, and documents. Seeing the proof hit me hard. Megan really was cheating. While we talked, I learned Janet had 3 large koi ponds in her backyard. I was intrigued and asked if I could bring the kids over to see them sometime. She seemed genuinely happy I was interested and said she'd love to have us visit. Right then, the action started on the monitor. As Janet had predicted, Kirk and Megan walked into the room and began undressing without any conversation or foreplay. They just stripped and jumped onto the bed. The video quality was good, but the audio was garbled. Not that it mattered, seeing the images was what counted. I felt awkward sitting next to a stranger while watching my wife and her husband engage in that. Wow, you don't see that every day, Janet commented. I managed to smile, but didn't know how to respond. In fact, I didn't know what to say at all. Janet, I don't mean to interrupt, but do we really have to watch all of this? I asked, feeling uncomfortable. I take it this isn't something you want to watch, she said. Not really. Honestly, I find watching my wife being intimate with another man pretty disturbing, and it feels even weirder doing it with you here, I confessed. Well, the whole thing is being recorded, which is all the lawyers need. We don't have to keep watching, she said. To be honest, I'm not exactly enjoying it either. The plot seems pretty predictable anyway. Are you planning to head home? She asked. Actually, I was hoping you could show me your koi ponds. That seems a lot more interesting than 2 hours of. Well, this, I replied. Her eyes lit up, thrilled that I had taken an interest in her hobby. She jumped up, and as we walked toward the back of the house, I couldn't help but hear Megan reaching her. Moment. I had a feeling my afternoon would be far more enjoyable than hers. The koi ponds were incredible, and I was especially intrigued by the pump and filtration systems, given my background as a plumber before I started working at the school. Janet told me Kirk never helped with her hobby, so she had to hire people to handle the pipes and pumps. Naturally, I offered to help anytime Kirk was off golfing. I wasn't trying to flirt with Janet, I was just genuinely interested in learning more about the ponds. But spending time with her certainly wasn't a bad thing. After a few hours, which passed much too quickly, we headed back inside. The motel room was empty, so it was time for me to leave. Janet promised to call the next time Kirk had a golf game so I could bring Sarah and Todd over. The next few weeks were tough. Every time Megan took a shower, I checked her bag, and there was always a new stash of condoms. I couldn't figure out when she was sneaking off to use them all. I kept a safety pin on my keychain, ready to poke holes in the fresh ones. Any day now, I expected her to need a surprise visit to her sister's house. In the evenings, after Kirk had a golf game, the kids would tell Megan all about their visits to the koi lady, but she never seemed interested. They would show her their drawings of the fish and tell her the names they had given each one. Megan never seemed to realize that Kirk's wife was actually the koi lady. She seemed almost relieved that I was keeping the kids occupied while she was having her affairs. I tried twice more to convince her to quit her job and stop seeing Kirk, but both times she flatly refused, and the second time she got downright mean. I also started making excuses to avoid being intimate with her, and she responded with snide comments about my masculinity. It stung a bit, but it made justifying my actions easier. Then, on a Tuesday night, Megan dropped a bomb. Phil, I've been feeling really stressed lately. I'd like to take a week off from work and spend a few days at my sister's. Do you think you could watch the kids while I unwind? Of course, I replied. You've been working a lot of late nights and overtime. I think it's a great idea for you to relax. A trip to your sister's sounds a lot better than spending time with a therapist. Go ahead and enjoy yourself. I'll handle everything. I'm glad you understand, she said. All this extra work is for the family, but I think I've overdone it. That night, I struggled to sleep, my mind racing with all the things I needed to get done the next day. Despite the tension, I was relieved that this moment had finally come. Megan's sister Nancy and her husband Brad lived about 3 hours away. Brad was an okay guy but completely dominated by Nancy. Whatever she said, he did. Interestingly, the town where they lived had 2 abortion clinics. I had the addresses, operating hours, and information on both. Each required a 2-day waiting period before the procedure could be performed. That meant the earliest Megan could schedule her appointment was Friday, assuming she went in on Wednesday. I figured she'd want to get it done as quickly as possible to allow herself time to recover before coming home. That gave me about a day and a half to get everything set up. Once Megan left for her rest and relaxation, I started putting my plans into motion. I had to explain the situation to my parents, which was hard. It felt like admitting I had failed as a husband, but they were supportive and offered to help. The kids enjoyed staying with them, and Dad's truck would be useful for moving Megan's belongings out. The lawyer would have the divorce papers ready for me to pick up on Thursday morning. Janet's paperwork was also prepared, and she planned to serve Kirk at the same time I served Megan. My only issue was whether I should give Megan one final opportunity to make things right, though I didn't have much hope. Dad and I stayed busy the rest of the day packing up Megan's things. On Thursday morning, after a 3-hour drive, I arrived at the first clinic. It was a bust, leaving only one more option: the Family Planning Center. Trying to appear confident, I approached the receptionist. "Hi, my name is Phil Jenkins. My wife Megan said I needed to come in and sign a consent form." "What kind of form?" she asked. "I'm not sure of the exact name," I admitted, "but it's a form stating that I understand what's going on and agree with it, and that I won't take legal action or anything like that." "Hold on a moment. Megan Jenkins, right?" "Yes, that's correct. Do you need to see any ID I offered?" She shook her head and clicked away on her computer for a few seconds. "Her sister signed for her, but your signature would be preferable. Hold on while I get the file." Jackpot. Now I just had to keep it together for a couple more minutes. She placed the form in front of me, and I noticed the procedure was scheduled for 11:00 a.m. on Friday, with instructions to arrive an hour early. "Do we owe any more money?" I asked, pulling out my checkbook. "No, your wife paid the full amount, $800 in cash. Nothing else is due." "Thanks for your help," I said, pretending to be relieved. "This makes things so much easier." When I arrived at Nancy and Brad's place, the welcome I received was so over the top it was laughable. Megan greeted me with, "Phil, what a wonderful surprise. What brings you here?" "Well, Mom and Dad offered to watch the kids for a few days, so I took some sick leave and thought I'd drop in on you guys. I guess you could say I needed to unwind too." The room fell into an awkward silence. I could see the wheels turning in everyone's minds as they tried to figure out how to handle the situation. Nancy nodded to Brad, and the two of them retreated to the kitchen, while Megan made meaningless small talk. A few minutes later, Brad returned. "Phil, I've got a great idea," he said enthusiastically. "I can take the day off tomorrow, and we can borrow my buddy Jack's base boat. We'll head out early and spend the day on the lake, so we won't be bothering the ladies. How does that sound?" "Sounds perfect, Brad. A day on the water should take all my worries away. See if Jack can join us." "Will do. I'll get everything arranged," Brad said, looking relieved. The rest of the evening was uneventful, with dinner and idle chit-chat. Naturally, there was no intimacy that night. Megan didn't want her sister to overhear. Early the next morning, Jack arrived with the boat. Brad was in the kitchen, packing lunch and loading the cooler with beer. As we prepped the truck and boat, Brad asked, "Aren't you getting in the truck?" "No, Brad," I replied. "I've decided not to go. You should make a day of it, though, because I doubt you'll want to face Nancy for the next few hours." Brad spent 5 minutes trying to convince me to come along, but after I dropped a few choice swear words and some light threats, he and Jack finally left. I went back into the house, poured myself a cup of coffee, and turned off Megan's cell phone. Then I picked up the landline and called my dad. He was always up early. We talked for about 2 hours, during which time the call waiting tone chimed in repeatedly. Probably Brad trying to reach Nancy. Eventually, he gave up. By the time I heard Nancy and Megan stirring, I hung up with Dad and got ready for the inevitable confrontation. I erased the missed calls from the landline and reactivated my phone. Within less than 2 hours, Megan and Nancy were scheduled to be at the Family Planning Center in about 5 minutes, and I was about to face 2 very upset women. I had already finished off the first pot of coffee, so I brewed another for my loving wife and her sister. "Phil, why are you here?" Megan gasped. I replied, "I didn't feel like fishing today, so I thought I'd hang out with you two instead. Maybe we could grab lunch at a nice spot, since I'm heading back tonight." It didn't feel like spending the day in a smelly boat with Brad and Jack. "No, that's not going to work," Megan replied. "Nancy and I already have plans today, and we'd prefer to go alone. I can hang out with you anytime, but I only see Nancy a couple of times a year." "You're here all week," Megan, I countered. "I drove all the way down here. The least you could do is give me half a day. You've got the rest of the week for your sisterly stuff." Nancy grabbed her phone and left the room, dialing as she walked out. Megan, now slouched in her kitchen chair, looked like she'd been hit by a truck. We could hear Nancy yelling at Brad on the phone like he had just committed some heinous crime. I felt bad for the guy, but hey, he married her. "Phil, I don't want to be mean, but Nancy and I really don't want you coming with us today. We've got the whole day planned, and it doesn't include you." "Fine. Tell me what you're doing today, and I'll decide if I want to tag along. If I'm not interested, I'll find something else to do." "I don't get why you're so insistent, though. You've got the entire week here. I only have today. You aren't secretly meeting up with some guys, are you?" "No, we're not meeting guys," she snapped. "We're just shopping for some intimate items, bras, underwear, nightgowns, stuff we'd rather not have you guys around for when we're trying it on." "Well, Most of those stores are in the mall. I can busy myself while you're in the fitting rooms. I'll just hang out and not bother you. And when lunchtime comes, I'll treat you both to something nice to make up for the hassle." Nancy stood in the doorway, glaring at me without a word. Megan could see I wasn't about to back down and looked like she was about to give in. Both women were still in their robes. Finally, Megan got up. "I need to get dressed," she said, as she walked out. Nancy gave me a scornful look. "You're such a jerk," she muttered, before heading upstairs after Megan. About 20 minutes later, the landline lit up. Someone upstairs was making a call. Time was ticking, and they had about an hour to reach the center. I was considering my next move in case they tried to leave without me. I planned to follow them if they did, just to make sure they knew I wasn't backing off, but I didn't think they'd try that. Sure enough, 20 minutes later they both came downstairs. "Okay, Phil, let's go shopping," Megan said with a touch of attitude. It was easier than I expected. That phone call must been to reschedule the family planning center appointment, probably figuring they could wait me out since I was leaving that night. I wasn't trying to stop Megan from getting the abortion, but I did want to make it harder for her. I insisted on driving, not wanting them to abandon me somewhere far from home. We stopped at a service station where I filled up the tank, checked the oil and water, and cleaned the windshield, probably the most thorough car maintenance I'd ever done. Meanwhile, they just sat there, clearly frustrated. When we got to the mall, I parked far out, so we'd have a long walk in. Once inside, I let them be. I kept an eye on them but didn't care much about what they were doing or buying. They didn't seem to be enjoying themselves, spending most of the time talking to each other and gesturing. They picked up a few items just to show me they had actually been shopping. I tried to stay out of sight but kept them within view. It was clear they were having a serious conversation, and the time for their appointment had passed. I had managed to delay the inevitable, though I knew she would still go through with the procedure, and I had no plans to interfere any further. A little after noon, they returned to the center of the mall, where we agreed to meet. We headed to the Olive Garden for lunch and made it back to the house around 2:00 p.m. There wasn't much talking during lunch or the ride back home. I was inwardly smiling the whole time, fully aware that both women despised me at that moment, and I didn't care. It was a great feeling. I grabbed a beer and relaxed on the couch. Brad finally returned home, and for about 30 minutes, Nancy unleashed a verbal assault on him. He eventually snuck out the door and disappeared for a few hours, but he was back in time for dinner. After the women finished cleaning up, I asked Brad and Nancy if Megan and I could have a private conversation in the kitchen. Nancy shot me one of her famous glares, and they both retreated to the living room. And Megan was still angry with me because of everything that happened earlier, and I could tell she wasn't going to be easy to talk to. "Megan," I began, "I want to ask you one last time, please quit your job and stop seeing Kirk Langford." Her jaw tightened, and I could see she was doing everything she could to hold back her anger. "Damn it, I don't ever want to hear that again. I'm sick of you bringing it up constantly, and I won't waste my breath answering you anymore. You already know my response is the same as it always has been, and it's not changing. Either come up with something new or get the hell out." I reached into the manila envelope next to me and pulled out a legal document. "Megan, I've asked you at least 10 times in the past 2 months, and you've refused every time. I had no other choice. These are divorce papers. All you have to do is sign them and send them in. I even included a stamped, self-addressed envelope. Feel free to have a lawyer look them over if you want." She glared at me, leaning across the table. "You idiot. You can't divorce me just because I won't quit my job or ditch my friends. You don't have grounds for divorce, and you know it. I think it's time for you to leave and get your act together. I'm your wife, and I'm not giving up my home and family just because you don't approve of where I work." "Megan, why did you come to visit your sister this week?" I asked. "That's a dumb question, and you know it. We talked about it before I came down." "That's a lie, and you know it. So what's the real reason I pushed? You tell me, since you think you know everything, you jerk." "Megan, why did you and Nancy go to the family planning center on Wednesday?" I asked. The room grew silent, and Megan shifted uncomfortably in her seat. A bit of her tough exterior seemed to falter. "I don't know what you're talking about." Leaning forward, I quietly asked, "Why did you give the family planning center $800 in cash?" Megan didn't respond. Though she was looking my way, her eyes seemed to be focused elsewhere. She swallowed hard, as though something unpleasant was caught in her throat. "Why did you have an appointment at the family planning center at 11:00 a.m. this morning? What were they supposed to do for you with the $800 you paid them?" "God damn it, stop bothering me about things you know nothing about. It's none of your damn business why I was there or what I was doing." Her anger flared up again. "Megan, the family planning center performs abortions. You know it, I know it, and the whole town knows it. Since I got a vasectomy for your convenience, why would you need an abortion? Maybe the procedure didn't work as well as you thought, and you should get checked." I reached back into the envelope beside me. "Here are 3 lab reports, one from 2 months ago, one from last month, and one from last week. They all show I'm not producing viable sperm. I have the documents to prove it. Would you care to show me a report from the family planning center confirming that you aren't pregnant?" "You bastard," Meghan hissed. "That still doesn't give you grounds for divorce. Why don't you just admit you've been having an affair with Kirk Langford for the last 6 months and get it over with? We both know what's been going on, yet you refuse to come clean." "You have no proof that I've done anything with anyone other than you," Meghan shot back. "I'm not going to sit here and listen to you go on about something that never happened." "So you've never slept with Kirk Langford?" I asked. "No, I'm your wife, and I've only been with you." "Then how do you explain being pregnant?" I asked. Meghan bit her lip hard, clearly struggling to come up with an answer that wouldn't incriminate her. I reached into my envelope again and pulled out a set of photographs. I laid out 6 pictures of Meghan and Kirk. "Did you sleep with him?" She didn't respond, so I placed another 6 photos on the table, showing them in various compromising positions. "Stop it. Just stop it already," Meghan yelled. "I get it. You've been spying on me. You're such a sneaky bastard. Why didn't you confront me like a man? Instead, you creep around taking pictures like some kind of pervert. You make me sick with all your whining." At that moment, my phone rang. "Hi, Dad, all right, 10 minutes works. Thanks for the heads up," I said as I ended the call. She looked over and blurted, "What was that about?" I responded, "My dad is bringing your stuff over here to Nye's place. He should be here in about 10 minutes. The locks have been changed on our house. If there's anything we forgot to pack, let me know, and I'll get it to you." She just sat there, silently. I handed her an envelope. "Here's the title to your car. I've already signed it over to you. Inside the envelope is half of the money from our bank accounts, around $1,200. I've also arranged for you to have visitation with the kids once a week. If you're willing to sign a notarized statement admitting to the affair, I'll even allow overnight stays once a month. Oh, and by the way, I have a DVD that I didn't get a chance to show you. It's from your visit with Kirk to the Scandia Motel on May 10th. It's 2 hours long and captures everything that's in those pictures. As I picked up the photos, I added, "I didn't take any of these pictures. I didn't care what you were doing, but I didn't like being made a fool of. Lastly, I want you to have this keepsake of our love." I pulled the safety pin from my keychain and slid it across the table. "What the hell is this?" Meghan asked. "That's the pin I used to poke tiny holes in all of your condoms for the past 2 months. Did you know you used 48 of them in just 2 weeks? Kirk was getting more action than I ever imagined getting. He's one lucky guy." "You despicable little weasel. That's the most vile thing I've ever heard of," Meghan fumed. "No, dear, the most disgusting thing is sleeping with someone you're not married to. I might be a jerk, but you're a real cheater." I stood up. "Sorry, I have to go." Dad just pulled into the driveway. "Oh, and in case you didn't notice, you never once said you were sorry for what you did. You don't deserve to be married to me. Goodbye, Meghan, and enjoy your abortion on Monday." As I walked out, she finally began crying. Nancy rushed in to console her, while Brad followed me onto the porch. "What the hell are you doing, man?" Brad asked, grabbing my arm. "You two have been married for 14 years. You can't just throw that away over a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding? Brad, why did my wife come here to visit you and Nancy?" He looked down at his feet for a few moments, seemingly deep in thought. "Sorry, Phil, let me help you unload the truck." We had the truck unloaded in about 10 minutes, while Meghan wailed from the kitchen the whole time. I wasn't sure what she was crying about, and to be honest, I didn't care. Both Kirk and Meghan were fired from Globus the following week. Meghan refused to sign an affidavit, but the lawyer said we had a solid case without it. After that night, I didn't hear from my so-called loving wife again. She didn't visit the kids, but they didn't seem to mind since they were growing close to Janet. We spent a lot of time together as a family. Though there was no intimacy or even talk of it, we weren't about to risk anything that could jeopardize the divorce. The kids and I were learning a lot about Koi, and we were having a great time. After 4 months, both divorces were finalized. Meghan didn't put up a fight, but Kirk went down kicking and screaming. He lost the house, all of his investments, and was ordered to pay hefty alimony each month. Just before Christmas, Meghan showed up at the house with presents for the kids. I was polite and didn't do anything to spoil the holiday mood. She stayed for about 2 hours and left as quietly as she arrived. Not a word was exchanged about the affair or the divorce. I put the house on the market, and 2 months later, the kids and I moved in with Janet. Kirk took a job in Omaha, and Meghan followed him. 4 months later, Kirk vanished without a word, and Meghan returned to live with Nancy. By that time, Brad had left to work on the Alaskan pipeline, and 2 months later, Nancy received divorce papers in the mail. I'm sure the two sisters are keeping each other company. Janet and I are doing well. She adores the kids, and they feel the same way about her. We're planning to get married in June and spend as much time as possible preparing for our honeymoon. And that brings us to the end of today's story. Was it what you anticipated, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'd love to know your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let's discuss. If this story kept you hooked, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you're new here or haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join the community. I share fresh, gripping stories every day, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.